You're tuned in to Inscendence on WURS Fresh and Radio, where we go in to ascend. This is a Black queer led audio sanctuary where sound becomes shelter, storytelling supports healing, and integrity matters more than urgency. I'm Zaire. Today's mini episode is entitled Digital Sanctuaries, a Capstone in Sound. We're glad you're here. This episode is different in that it's part of a mini series. What you're about to hear is not a story pulled from theory. It is theory shaped by survival. This episode offers a guided audio synthesis of my liberal studies capstone, Digital Sanctuaries: How Black Queer Folk Can Build Safety, Community, and Identity in Media Spaces. This 5-episode autoethnographic podcast series serves as a creative and reflexive companion to my interdisciplinary capstone. While the written capstone synthesizes interdisciplinary secondary research across sociology, mass communications, and media studies, this audio series translates its findings into embodied narrative form, centering lived experience, voice, and sound as sites of knowledge production or audio praxis. Together, the paper and podcast enact an Africana digital pedagogy, as coined by researchers led by communications and Black Studies scholar Clarence George III, that bridges scholarship, storytelling, and survival. In this first episode, I'll concisely walk through an overview of the problem, the background, the gaps, literature, methods, and findings, not as lecture, but as integrative narrative. Because for Black, queer, and trans communities, survival has never been abstract. The starting point of this research is simple but severe. Black, queer, and trans people in the United States are experiencing increasing levels of social, political, and institutional harm, often in spaces historically meant to protect Black lives. Places like Black churches, types of Black churches, historically Black colleges and universities or HBCUs, and neighborhoods and cultural institutions formed in response to racial exclusion. Research by Dr. Lori Patton Davis and crew use sociological methods such as critical race theory and qualitative methods, revealing that while the previously named physical spaces frequently affirm Black racial identity, they often do so by disciplining or erasing queerness and transness. The result is a familiar demand placed on Black queer people. You must fragment yourself in order to belong. Over time, this fragmentation becomes more than social discomfort. It accumulates psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. This harm is what scholars describe as minority stress, the compounded impact of living at the intersection of racism, queerphobia, and transphobia. The problem this capstone addresses is not simply exclusion, but the long term consequences of being required to disappear in order to remain safe. Historically, Black liberation in the United States has been tethered to respectability politics. Survival was framed as discipline, such as feeling like you have control over a situation. For example, when some Black parents give their kids the talk about when you learn to drive, how you interact with law enforcement in hopes that it saves your life, as if you have control over that or you can have more control. Also, respectability politics creates this theme of protection as conformity. How can you assimilate and better mold yourself into a situation to survive? In this framework, queerness and gender expansiveness were treated as threats to collective progress rather than expressions of lineage. The Black church, while functioning as a site of racial resistance, has also reproduced heteronormative and cisnormative standards. Similarly, HBCUs have served as critical spaces for Black intellectual life, while frequently marginalizing queer and trans students through policies, campus, culture, and silence. Across time, this produces a consistent pattern. Protection is offered only at the cost of erasure. As these physical sanctuaries become psychologically unsafe, Black queer communities have not stopped seeking refuge. Instead, survival strategies have shifted. Much of the existing scholarship examines racism or queerness, but not both together. Some studies focus on Black communities while assuming heterosexuality. Others examine LGBTQ plus experiences while centering whiteness. Black queer women, lesbians, and trans people are often rendered invisible or collapsed into broader categories that fail to capture their realities. Additionally, while media studies acknowledge the rise of digital platforms, they rarely center intersectionality as an analytic tool. What is missing is sustained interdisciplinary scholarship that asks, how do Black, queer, and trans people actively build safety, identity, and resistance, especially through media? This gap is where digital sanctuaries intervenes. Across sociology, media studies, and Black feminist scholarship, a set of themes emerge. Sociological research illustrates how exclusion from affirming environments contributes to compounded minority stress and mental health disparities. Media studies reveal that digital spaces, podcasts, independent radio, and social platforms, they can function as relieving online counter spaces, places where marginalized people reclaim voice, visibility with less immediate risk. Sound based media, in particular, offer something distinct. Voice carries intimacy, tone carries feeling, listening allows recognition and being seen. Scholarship on podcasts and radio demonstrates that sonic spaces can cultivate queer joy, collective memory, and emotional regulation, all of which function as survival mechanisms rather than distractions. Taken together, the literature suggests that digital media can operate as sanctuaries, not perfect sanctuaries, but still vital ones. Methodologically, this capstone is secondary research study. Rather than collecting new empirical data, I synthesize existing scholarship across the disciplines of sociology, mass communications, and media studies to identify patterns of exclusion, survival, and resistance. The interdisciplinary synthesis allows for a more complete account of Black queer digital survival than any single discipline could provide. Reflexivity is also essential to this method. My analysis is informed by my own social location as a Black queer and trans scholar, media maker, and spiritual care practitioner. This reflexive positioning doesn't weaken the rigor of the study. It actually clarifies the standpoint and my accountability to it. The findings of this study are clear. First, traditional physical sanctuaries frequently fail Black, queer, and trans people, affirming racial identity while marginalizing gender and sexuality. Second, digital and sonic spaces function as meaningful refuges. Podcasts, independent radio, and social media allow for independent identity affirmation, community formation, and creative resistance. Third, these sanctuaries are structurally constrained. Algorithmic bias, content moderation in gray areas, targeting Black and trans folk, and digital surveillance reproduce the same harm even in spaces designed for refuge, and particularly online. So, therefore, sanctuary exists, but it's fragile. The central conclusion of this research is that Black, queer, and trans survival is not passive retreat. It is active world building. Digital sanctuaries are not escapes from reality. They are strategies for staying alive and expressive within hostile conditions. This audio series does not simply analyze Sonic Sanctuary, it participates in it. Together, the written capstone and this podcast form a single scholarly intervention, one that treats storytelling, sound, and reflexivity as legitimate ways of knowing. This isn't just theory, this is survival. This has been Inscendence, where sound is sanctuary. Want to go deeper? Tune into the next mini series episode where we'll be discussing this selection by selection, beginning with the episode entitled When Sacred Spaces Shut Their Doors. If you'd like to read the paper, please explore my e-portfolio at zaire.weebly.com. That's Zaire, Xyaire, Weebly, Weebly.com. Thank you for spending some time. Take good care of you. Goodbye for now.